Hey Bears, Mr. Kicklighter here, providing the follow-up recorded lesson for our live social studies lesson that we had earlier this week. We talked about Juneteenth in our live lesson. We asked, what is it and why is it celebrated? And before our lesson, I asked my students this question, and I got responses like, I don't know, which is okay because it was a pre-assessment. And if you didn't know, that's great. You needed to be at the lesson. I got responses such as, it's Freedom Day, it's a holiday, it's when slaves were freed. Don't be upset if you don't see your answer up there. I just had to take a few of them from there. I couldn't use everybody's or it would have taken me all day. So after we asked that question, we got kind of an idea of what people know. We did our research. We watched a video that had a lady who had a graduate degree from Georgetown University in history, and specifically African American history. That makes her an expert. That is a great source to go to when we want to learn things. Especially when we want to learn things about a specific subject, and their graduate degree is in that subject, such as African American history. So we listened to that, we looked up some stuff online, we pulled from several different resources, and after the lessons, I had students tell me that people celebrate Juneteenth because, and one of the answers was because they could finally live their lives. Another answer was they want to remember and honor their ancestors who suffered in slavery. They want to honor the people who died in slavery, and they want to honor the accomplishments of their ancestors who died in slavery. So, a lot of the reasons that we gave after educating ourselves about what Juneteenth is and why it's celebrated was that the people of today want to honor people in history for the accomplishments that they've made and the sacrifices that they've made so that life can be better for the people who live in America today. Thinking about that, I want us to talk about Independence Day. We celebrate Independence Day, and I think that probably all of the students in our class understand that July 4th is a day in our country that is a holiday. They would probably tell you that people have picnics, they have get togethers with family during this day. We shoot off fireworks during Independence Day. I don't think you can live in the city of Louisville and not know that fireworks get shot off on Independence Day and any given day around Independence Day as well. So I would ask us to look at Independence Day through the lens of Juneteenth and to compare these two holidays to see what they have. So, first off, let's look at the word independence. So, independence means that you are no longer um, controlled or governed by someone that you've been governed by before. So, a good example of this is that most people, most Americans in our country and our culture and in the cultures that are here, when you turn 18 years old, you are considered to be an adult. That means that you have independence from your parents. Now, your parents weren't cruel and unusual, but they did have control over you and they were responsible for you. But now you're an adult and you make your own decisions. You live in your own house. Sometimes you stay with your parents. That is independence. Independence is also defined as being freed from something. You know what? Let's be scholars and let's just look up the independence definition. So, independence is actually defined as the fact or state of being independent. I can't stand it when they use the root word in a definition. This one over here looks a lot better. It says independence is a condition of a person, nation, country, or state in which its residents and population, or some portion thereof, exercise self government and usually sovereignty over the territory. The opposite of independence is the status of a dependent territory. So, if you are dependent on something, right? So let's say I am dependent upon my car to get to the grocery store. Okay. If I decide that I'm going to start using a delivery service for my groceries and have them delivered. I am now independent from my car, but I have become dependent on the person who is going to deliver those groceries. We're rolling down a rabbit hole. Let's reel it back in. So we were talking about Juneteenth. Now we're talking about Independence Day. We defined the word independence. Independence means that you don't depend on somebody, that you're not that you're not governed by somebody. So we celebrate Independence Day to celebrate the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And that was when the 13 colonies, who were the first Europeans to live in America, they declared that they were no longer going to be governed by England. And England was way across the ocean, 5,000 miles away. And King George III was the head of that government. It was a monarchy government. They had a king and a queen, and that was who governed and made the laws. And let me tell you, a lot of times those laws were unfair to the people who lived in the colonies and benefited the king in England. Now, you can imagine that if someone was sending you rules and telling you things and charging you taxes and charging you money and making you send your money and your crops and your goods all the way 5,000 miles away to go benefit that person, and you weren't seeing any benefits of your own work, you might not want to live that way, right? Well, that's how the people, the settlers in the 13 original colonies in America felt. And they decided on July 4th, 1776, that they were fed up, they weren't going to have it anymore, and they decided to break away from England. Now, this was a big deal. England sent troops. King George III was not happy about this. He sent soldiers, he sent his army, and they fought a long war called the Revolutionary War, or the War for Independence. And this war was fought, and lots of people died. There were many, many battles, but in the end, the 13 colonies were victorious and they won their independence from Britain. They no longer had to send their money over to England. They no longer had to send their crops over to England. They could keep what they made for themselves and what they had worked so hard for themselves. And that's why we celebrate that, because of their sacrifice, because of our ancestors' sacrifice back in the 1770s, fighting the war that they fought against England, we no longer have to send part of our taxes over to England. We can keep those for our country. We do pay taxes for our country, but our taxes now get spent on things like roads, schools, and stuff that we benefit from in our own country. Now, let's think about this. If you were a slave back in the 1800s in a country that has already declared its independence from someone else, and you're working day and night, sometimes in horribly harsh and hot conditions, this was very, very hard work that these slaves did. And then at the end of the day, where did everything that they had worked for go? It went to their masters. And it went to the people who owned the slaves. And it went to the people who would spend that money on things that did not benefit the slaves. So I ask you, how are Juneteenth and Independence Day any different? Both holidays celebrate the freedom of a group of people. Both holidays celebrate the ability to have what you've worked for and use what you've worked for. I would also ask you to look at the differences. What are the differences? The people who signed the Declaration of Independence back in 1776, they did fight a war, and many of them died. But once they had declared their independence, once they won that war, they got to live here in America 5,000 miles away from the people who used to govern them. After Juneteenth, When the slaves in Texas found out that they were free, did they get land? Did they get to move away from the people who had governed them, from the people who were masters over them, and live in a place where they didn't have to see or hear or worry about those people again? No, they did not. They had to stay. And I think that is good for us to understand when we start to understand what current events are going on in our country. I think that that is important for us to understand and think about when we think about what's going on in our country right now and the things that we're seeing on the news and the feelings that people are having. So, after watching this video, I'm going to ask you to come in here and write for me, what is Independence Day? I'm going to ask you to come in and put in here, why do people celebrate Independence Day? And I'm going to ask you to put on the next and last slide, how are Independence Day and, not that, Independence Day and Juneteenth similar and different? I'm looking forward to seeing your responses. You guys have been doing a great job so far in NTI, and I really appreciate all of your hard work. Um, Please send me an email if you have any questions. Please comment if you have any questions. Other than that, I'll see you guys soon.